My name is Lila Graves. I am a 27-year-old woman living in the small town of Maplewood. It is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and secrets have a way of spilling out into the open. I have always prided myself on being resourceful and resilient. I work at the local bookstore by day, where the scent of paper and ink wraps around me like a comforting blanket. I love helping customers find just the right book, and I often escape into my world of fantasy and adventure during my breaks. However, my world slipped into chaos not too long ago, and I found myself grappling with a situation I never expected to face. It started last month when a guy named Derek, a friend of a friend, came to me with an offer I thought was harmless. Derek claimed he could grab some supplies that I needed, items that weren't readily available in our quaint little town. I figured I could trust him because he seemed connected enough to get what I wanted, so I handed him $500, thinking it was a small price to pay for goods I could not easily find, and told him I would pick them up later. Little did I know, I was handing my money over to a thief. Days went by with no word from Derek. I messaged him repeatedly, but my texts were left unanswered. Panic began to seep in like a slow poison, gnawing at my sanity. I even tried calling him, but heard nothing until he finally responded. He casually texted on a Sunday, claiming he would return my money the next day, but out of nowhere, he accused me of threatening him. "I heard you were going to fight me if I did not give you your money back," he wrote, and my heart sank. Here I was, a petite woman, and Derek was significantly larger and more intimidating than me. He could easily overpower me, and I would be lying if I said I did not feel a smidge of fear. I had never even hinted at violence. This was not who I was, and the idea of Derek approaching me in a dark alleyway sent shivers down my spine. What if he was right? What if he recruited members of a gang like he claimed? I could not go to the police. This was Maplewood, not a big city where crime could be dealt with openly. My fear was palpable, wrapping itself around my throat like a noose. I began to feel trapped, each passing hour wearing away my will to the point where I felt like a caged animal. As the sun set on that Sunday evening, shadows danced in my small apartment, and I slumped down on my couch, my mind racing. I pondered my options. Could I confront Derek and demand justice? I imagined him towering over me, laughing. If I acted recklessly, it could make my situation worse. Each new thought felt heavier than the last. I wanted to do something dramatic, perhaps confront him at his home. But what if he was not alone? What if he had friends with him? I could not put myself in danger. I needed to be smart about this. But how could I reclaim my money without exposing myself to violence? With every brainstorming session, I grew more frustrated. I was spinning my wheels, stuck in a cycle of anxiety and dread. I couldn't keep living in fear, and desperation clawed at my insides. One night, as I tossed and turned in bed, a wild thought beset me. What if I used Derek's fear against him? Maybe I could outsmart him instead of challenging him physically. After a week of tormenting thoughts, I decided to gather information. I started asking around, trying to see if anyone knew more about him. Friends of friends and acquaintances could offer insights into his life. This time, I would not let fear run me. I learned from an old college buddy that Derek was somewhat famous in town, known for being a wannabe tough guy who had a penchant for intimidation, but rarely followed through. Maybe Derek had built himself up into something he was not. Perhaps his gang stories were just bluster to scare people into compliance. That night, armed with new affirmation and a fierce resolve, I hatched a plan. I would let Derek know I was not someone to mess around with. I could exploit what I had learned. The next morning, while mindlessly arranging bookshelves, I casually created a fake social media profile. With a new name and a few pictures lifted from the internet, I transformed myself into a tough-looking persona. I started posting about my love for underground street fighting and made some noise in local chat rooms, fabricating a narrative that I was part of a local network. The more virtual bravado I spread about the connections I supposedly had, the more emboldened I felt, and it attracted the attention of some people who thought they could use me as well. Within a few days, I fabricated an online reputation as an intimidating presence, someone Derek should fear rather than underestimate. I sent Derek a message from my new profile, full of bravado, stating that if he did not return the money by the end of the week, there would be consequences. I held my breath upon pressing send. Surely, he would buy it. To my surprise, he responded almost immediately. "You think you can intimidate me? I know people," he wrote back, but his tone was different. His posture had shifted, moving from arrogance to uncertainty. I felt a rush of power flow through my veins. This was a game, and for the first time I began to feel like I was winning. I kept up the charade, posting about the tactics and machinations of my fabricated network. I knew I was playing a risky game, but with every passing hour, I felt my confidence build. Derek began to show signs of apprehension. He lashed out, sending me frantic messages late at night about how he had connections too, but I could hear the crack in his bravado, a flicker of doubt. However, I had made one critical mistake when I reached out to someone who knew Derek from his past, eager to validate my ploy. This person had warned me against using such tactics, and as he unfolded Derek's real-life story, a narrative painted not with the brush of a tough guy, but with the strokes of a petty thief who had burned many bridges, I realized I had better tread carefully. The last thing I wanted was to provoke a cornered animal. With this precarious information in hand, I meticulously reevaluated my approach. While I still wanted to strike fear into Derek, I now understood that I needed to weave a narrative that allowed him to save face while still putting the pressure back on him. So, I shot him a message explaining that perhaps I had overreacted. After all, he could always return my money and end this before things got worse for us both. His response made my heart race. "I don't want trouble, Lila, you know how it is," he replied, sounding a tentative tone now. I kept my cool and played it by ear. But I knew I had him where I wanted, each message a step closer to the finish line where I would reclaim what was rightfully mine. I set a firm deadline: get me my $500 back or face the consequences with my new connections. I was teetering on the edge, knowing that I may be dancing with fire. Exactly 1 week after our initial confrontation, with Derek's nerves clearly fraying, he finally suggested a meet in a public space to return my cash. My heart raced as I read the words. Part of me was excited, and part of me was terrified, but I knew I had to keep my cool. A public space meant safety and an audience. I chose a small coffee shop with large windows that allowed everyone inside to see one another. The sun was shining, and the world outside felt eerily calm compared to the tempest swirling in my gut. I arrived early to scout the area and observe. I had set everything in motion, and all I needed was to follow through. When Derek entered, I noticed he was alone, yet he still held an air of unease. His shoulders hunched slightly as he approached me. I had rehearsed a dozen scenarios in my mind, wondering how I would react regardless of how he presented himself. But as he sat down, he looked decidedly less like a tough guy and more like a lost puppy. I took a deep breath, steeling myself to carry out my plan. I began by calmly addressing the situation, reminding him of our exchanges. "You have something that belongs to me, Derek," I said, my voice steady and cool. He shifted in his seat, nervously fumbling his hands, clearly recognizing he had miscalculated with me. I leaned across the table, staring into his eyes as I continued. "I understand you have certain connections, but I think it is time we both realize the real stakes of this interaction." As the pressure mounted, Derek ultimately looked down, clearly struggling to find an escape. And that is when it happened. Derek, in a fit of desperation, started to give me excuses. He claimed he lost the money while reaching out to people I would not want to cross. Panic flashed across his face as he frantically tried to explain his missteps. But I did not want his excuses, I wanted my money. I could feel the cocktail of adrenaline and anticipation surging through me as I pressed him harder, my voice low and firm. "We are done talking. Just give me back what is mine." And at that moment I caught sight of it, an envelope sticking out of his pocket. He must have brought the cash after all. In an instant, I reached forward and snatched it away, holding it tightly. I could not believe I had actually gotten the money back. There was a stunned silence and Derek's eyes widened. "You were bluffing," he exclaimed, disbelief mingling with rage. "Looks like the game is over, Derek," I replied calmly. My heart raced faster than it ever had before. There was something exhilarating about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. The tension in the air thickened as I pushed the envelope into my bag. Consider this a lesson learned. With that, I stood up, turning to leave. Just as I was about to walk away, a sharp voice called out from behind me. "What is going on here?" It was a friend of Derek's, someone I had heard about but never met. Panic surged through me had I overstepped, but Derek's demeanor shifted from anger to panic as he backed away. "Nothing, man, it is fine, just a misunderstanding." But the friend's gaze darted between us, suspicion clearly lingering. I took a deep breath, attempting to stay calm despite the panic roaring inside me. In that moment, I knew I had to make a choice, either stand my ground or retreat into fear again. Memories of the last week, of the dread I had endured, fueled me as I voiced my newfound confidence. You should be concerned about how you treat people, Derek. A strong show of force does not make you invulnerable. I shot him a look, and for a second, I could see him reconsidering his path. In front of witnesses, I didn't need to fear him anymore. With each step, I felt lighter, empowered not only by reclaiming my money, but by turning the tables. I walked out of that coffee shop with my head held high, determined not to let anyone push me around again. In Maplewood, I learned that you can't always rely on the authorities, but sometimes the strongest voice is your own. I felt renewed as I stepped out into the sunlight, the anxiety of the past few weeks fading as I made my way back home. That day was not merely a chapter of revenge, but a testament to resilience. As I unlocked my apartment, I knew that whatever challenges might follow in future, I had this victory to draw upon. That envelope was not just $500. It symbolized the strength I could summon when faced with adversity. While I continued my life in Maplewood, I carried with me not just the memory of that confrontation, but also a newfound confidence. I did not need to be the loudest in the room to make an impact, but I could fight for my dignity, my worth. I had learned the importance of standing up for myself, and while the ghosts of the past may linger, their hold over me had dissipated. Sometimes, the best revenge is not merely an act, but a triumph of self-assertion. In my new normal, I became more than just a woman dealing with her problems. I had become a warrior in my own story, capable of redirecting my fate and overcoming any obstacles in my path, and with each day, I reminded myself of where I came from and who I chose to be.